Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. Daniel McAdams is our co-host. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. We're finally up and ready to go.
Very good. We have a little thunderstorm going on, and we have a little bit of competition today, but we're here and we're going to do our very best to deliver our side of the news, try to straighten out the nonsense that a lot of people have to put up with. I listen to the nonsense because I want to know what they're thinking, and that's really discouraging when you have to listen to the regular stuff, but we have to know what people are hearing. And you know what, Daniel, I think right now things look a little bit better in that some of the major media is actually talking a little bit like us. And not that they're following us, but somebody influenced them in that direction. The one last thing is even if we did have some influence, we're not going to hear about it. Our job is just to do our best to research it and tell the truth and try to straighten this out. But there are two major things going on. The COVID nonsense continues. It's as mixed up as ever, but in a way, some good news coming out of there, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to start off with a bit of an update because it really is in the major news services today, and that has to do with Afghanistan and the mess that's over there. And it's 20 years old, and they act like, where this came from? Oh, President Biden created the whole monster. He was at fault. Now he's a powerful person. He was around for a long time. He could have said something about the coming crisis. He didn't do that. But to say that he has arrived and created all the inflation that we're dealing with, all the economic problems, but that's part of the politics. And right now, it's a monster of a problem in Afghanistan. Well, he didn't exactly create Afghanistan, but he was in charge of trying to smooth things over. And we have argued the case that Trump had a better idea, which never got followed through. That effort to come out of Afghanistan has been dropped. And so we have Biden running the show now. But Daniel, if there's anything to my theory, which is shared by many people, and I've just accepted it from other people, is that one of the plan is to have chaos at home, financially, civil liberties wise, lockdown, and even international. And though I don't like our empire, there are a lot of people who are ecstatic, and that's their whole goal. Not so much that they have a detest, not that they detest empires, and even our empire at times. It's just that the way it's being managed. It's a technical thing. But I don't like empires, and I like to see them go. But I don't like to see the disintegration in this manner, because I would think when you offer up liberty and cooperation and trade with people and principled politics and get only people in government that are willing to act like diplomats, you can't expect too much. But right now it is chaotic, and a lot of people now are threatened. A lot of people have gotten out, but we mentioned, I think yesterday, that the large majority are Afghanis. The American people that went over there, maybe they're ill-advised, or they go over as contractors, they go over as serving our military, and all these things. They haven't gotten out, and now there's mass confusion. First thing is, where the airplanes come in the airport, the directions are stay away. So I don't know how they're going to get them out if they can't get to the airport. Anyway, that's a military tactical thing that has to be dealt with, even though the long-term goal of getting out of there, I've been fighting for that even before they built up the military, 20 years ago. So here we are, but there've been one bomb. But the interesting thing, Daniel, I want you to comment on this is, everything that we hear, especially in the last 10 years or so, it's always been the Taliban. They've created all the problems, and they're the most evil. But what has happened to Al Qaeda and ISIS and the other groups of militants. They're out there. As a matter of fact, it's supposedly said that ISIS is doing the bombing now and maybe taking advantage of it, because I do not think that ISIS and the Taliban are bosom buddies. I think they compete for power just like the Western nations compete for power, and we have competition for power within our own setting. But right now, Daniel, I think there's a mess over there. I think things could be done differently, but there's no easy solution other than prevention. That's what our real solution is, preventing these problems, whether it's Iraq or Middle East or Syria or Libya. The whole works. Vietnam was a good example. Prevention would have been a much better way to handle problems like this around the world.
Yeah, so the big news this morning is that there's been a double bombing, we're being told. We're also being told that that ISIS is behind it. It's interesting because if you're cynical, you might think that's strange because we haven't heard anything about ISIS for a long time. And all of a sudden, as in sort of a bad horror movie, they come walking back on stage to take over. However, at the same time, you do have target of opportunity. And if ISIS is interested in taking care of opportunities, you have the United States military at the airport in Kabul, surrounded by Taliban forces, essentially defenseless in a way, certainly in the strategic sense, unless you're going to do some over-the-horizon bombing of Kabul, which doesn't seem to be in the cards. So it is possible that it is a bombing of convenience, so to speak, because the U.S. is there. Interesting about this, Dr. Paul, is that apparently the Taliban called the United States, informed the United States of the threat beforehand. So we do have an interesting situation, and this tends to bolster what you've just said, and which we do know, which is that the Taliban are mortal enemies of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They have a different religious philosophy, and they're at war with each other. So you also see a situation where the Taliban are warning the U.S., and it might be because, hey, we don't want to be blamed for it because we know what Biden has said, we're going to retaliate. But it also could be a kind of an olive branch, if you will, that, we're going to not allow unnecessary threats to hit you. But as it stands right now, as you say, it's chaos. There are a lot of injuries. So far, we see about 52 people confirmed injured, including U.S. Marines. My guess is it'll go up from that, from the pictures that we've seen. But it's a very tense situation, and it looks like the U.S. is going to call off the airlift a few days early. At least that's the news that we're hearing.
Very good. And Daniel, I believe you and I, at least, will be talking about this for a while longer. This problem is not going away. And even if it was temporarily solved or quieted down in Afghanistan, until we change our foreign policy, we're going to have this endlessly. And I would say the current foreign policy is an outgrowth of what was the consequence of the victory in World War II, with us assuming not only the economic power of the world, but the military power, and we've thrown our weight around. And right now, I think the world would like to see us fail at the various groups around the world. But I want to go over to what's going on real more or less, with COVID, because there's a news story, and I indicated at the opening that there's an indication that the media's tone has changed a little bit. I think we even mentioned that yesterday. What's going on in here? Why is this tone changing? So we want to talk a little bit about that. And the first item I want to mention comes from Julie Stenhuisen. She writes for Chicago Reuters, and she talks about LA County. And we've seen numbers like this, and because in various places, this is what's turning up. But this one's pretty startling. I mean, excitingly too, because it comes from Reuters. And the claim is in this article that 25% of the infections in Los Angeles County residents occur with fully vaccinated individuals. So boy, yeah, we talk about this, Daniel, at risk. They'll say, see, we know we need a third shot. That's what they'll turn it into. But eventually that won't work. And I think we're at that point where the people aren't buying into this. There's growing resistance. And it was great that there was a football stadium empty or getting to be empty where people just refused to go to a National Football League game because they had to show passports and things like that. But I think that the overblown handling of the coronavirus will come to an end, but not without some suffering, because though we look at what's going around the world, I don't at least sit here worrying that the invasion's coming. China is going to land troops in California. No, I don't say that. But there's something, the attack on our liberties is the reason it is said that we go around the world to protect our Constitution and protect our liberties. And I never understood that, because it has nothing to do with it. So whether it's a war against the virus or a war against Al Qaeda and the Taliban, it's a threat against our liberties, but it is not to defend our Constitution, because a constitutionalist and a good, strong pro-American foreign policy would be they would stay out of these entanglements like the founders advised. But nevertheless, we're seeing this, and I was glad to see this article just to make the point that there's a failure out there. Just having another, and even today we might be able to mention this one article that says that there's going to be every 6 months you have to get a booster, and they're going to do it to the military very soon, and the military is not too happy about it. So they're going in the opposite direction. Yeah, you're right, it's not working. Therefore, we have to give more shots, and pretty soon they'll probably say, well, maybe we have a new vaccine will do better.
Yeah, well, the Reuters report is very important, because this is the theme that we've been talking about for several days now, which is that even the mainstream media is noticing that there's a real problem with the vaccines, and there's a real problem with the approach that the U.S. government and its agencies, the CDC, for example, has taken in fighting the COVID virus. And we're seeing this over and over in the mainstream. And as we mentioned yesterday, Zero Hedge pulled out some segments of our show to point out the mainstream media is paying attention. But the article you mentioned is from Los Angeles County, as you say, and they found that some 25% of people that are getting infected from COVID are fully vaccinated. That means both shots. And we would say to that number, that is probably, we don't have the facts, but probably severely underreported, because as we know, CDC guidance has been do not report breakthrough infections unless they require hospitalizations. Whether LA County followed that guidance or not is a question, but I think it's safe to assume that that is a very severe underreporting. And when you think about what the CDC, what Fauci, and what the so-called experts said at the time, which is if you get these shots, you will not get COVID, full stop. And that is obviously undermined. And then they said, well, there could be some very rare cases of breakthrough. And now we're seeing, even if you take their numbers, hey, 1 in 4 is a breakthrough. You know, what are you going to do about it? So that's a big problem, and it undermines the entire narrative. And I think that's why we're seeing, Dr. Paul, and we've talked about this for the last few days, we're seeing all of a sudden some attention, including by Fauci himself, paid to early treatments of infections rather than, hey, get a vax or you're going to get a vent, which is what they've been saying all along. This is a huge shift. It's very important, and we have to pay very, very close attention to it, I think.
Daniel, I want to reiterate what you just said, because what Fauci is saying is what so often has been said by the doctors who have been friendly, who are a much more market approach and quite frankly, a scientific approach. And so with him changing that tune, you don't know how it happens, but we can't pretend we know exactly why he shifts, because he's shifting his gears all the time. And as excited as I was about this the other day when we heard about this, I said, Yes, I'm excited. I'm glad he's admitting this, but we better wait a day or two. But right now, it looks like he hasn't jumped on changing his tune. Uh, Zero Hedge have been very friendly with us and sympathetic to the positions we've taken. And there was a headline that I don't usually go it this way, and somebody might say we're bragging. I don't like braggarts, but it says their headlines: even mainstream media is now asking big questions about COVID vaccines. And they have an article and they mention our website and our program. So I think that's very nice for them to do that, but very good that they're allies. And there's a lot of good information that we get from Zero Hedge, and something to keep us up to date, because it's always changing, is there, and it's a real challenge to sort it out. The efforts to practice good medicine, to be not in denial and pretend that there are no dangers with the infection, but also bring it into a bit of a more sane position rather than a hysterical position of lockdowns. And yet, I've maintained, we're not there yet, but I've maintained that the type of government a country has is basically a reflection of what the people finally endorse. So I think the endorsements are changing because they were very, very scared last year. There's still a lot of people that are scared that way, and they don't want to take it because the officials, the government said this. The head doctor of the country said this. What would Ron Paul and these other people know if the head doctor in the country, said be scared? Well, I think that that is shifting. I think that's good.
Well, the other thing that we're seeing in the mainstream, and you did mention, and this is again Reuters, which has been among the most hysterical about COVID over the past year and about other things. But as you mentioned, now the US plans COVID-19 booster shots at 6 months instead of 8 months. And they're reporting based on reporting from the Wall Street Journal. So what it had been just days ago is that, well, after 8 months, you might need to get a booster shot. And the question that we had is, well, if you give them the same shot that kept fading, how is that going to make anything different? Is there new science? The answer has been no, but now they've moved it up from 8 months to 6 months. And here was Dr. Rochelle Wolinski, the head of the CDC, just yesterday. She said, quote, "We are concerned that strong protection against severe infection, hospitalization, and death could decrease in the months ahead." And notice that she did not say prevention against transmission, because they've already given up on that, which is a key feature of the vaccine. That's what makes it a vaccine, is that you can't transmit it. And that's the entire rationale behind vaccine mandates. If you have your vaccine, then you're not going to spread the disease. Well, they've already given up on that as well. So there is no rationale for what they're doing. And I think that's one of the reasons, Dr. Paul, that we're seeing so much scrambling among the so-called experts. It almost seems like when the mask is pulled off, or when Toto pulls the string back and you see the Wizard of Oz is just some guy with a bunch of levers. I think that's what we're seeing, and there's a real problem with that.
Right. Our governor has expressed themselves here in the last day or so, and he's not backing down. Even though up until recently there was no hint that things might not be as bad as they say, and of course the variant was new and damaging, and there were so many more deaths and all these things happening that many were couldn't wait to put the sanctions back on again. But the governor of Florida has not buckled, and the governor of Texas has not buckled. So I would say this is good, because I suspect that the numbers have been a bit distorted, and just this whole thing one statistic that I reported early on was this: the fact is they have to change their tune. The vaccines really aren't working, but they will argue with on that, and they'll say, well, maybe they're not as sick. They still get it, but they're not as sick. Anyway, I think things are changing, and we have to keep encouraging the people that are doing a good job. But the governor did make a good statement. He said he's not going to back down. And also, I wanted to mention also that the 6 months, this repetition on the shots, and the military is already, the enlistees and the non-generals, I don't think they're happy about this. I would think that, with the mess going on in Afghanistan, when you get involved constantly with wars that don't have really a precise purpose, and people who have been over there, I had somebody talk to me the other day that he spent 3 tours over there, and he finally came to the conclusion, what am I doing over here? And I think more of that will occur. And now people are starting to reassess. Some of the military has been over there. They're saying, oh yeah, and look at the way it has ended. So I think people will start questioning. Now they're going to get jabbed and think that's going to help solve their problem. That isn't it. So I think that some of this stuff might be moving us in the right direction.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting is that Rochelle Wolinski went on the Today Show, NBC's Today Show. Again, it doesn't get any more mainstream than that. And she was interviewed by a very friendly interviewer, and she was talking about the need to have so-called booster shot, a third shot. And the interviewer asked her, is there new data to support the effectiveness of a booster shot, or do you just hope that it works? And Dr. Wolinski, head of the CDC, said, there's no new data, but we hope it works. So we've gone from trust the science to we hope it works. And that is a massive, massive leap. And hopefully Americans are going to start questioning the people that have been paraded in front of them as experts, because it appears increasingly obvious that they literally don't know what they're talking about.
There's in medicine, there's always times when you don't absolutely know the outcome, and there may be question. But what if the doctor generally followed that pattern of giving some medicine for somebody that's very sick and say, well, I don't know if it'll work. I hope it does. I don't think that would be building confidence. So this is another episode or example of how the confidence is being lost, and they're not going to be reassured by people who don't have an answer, because the questions are going to grow and grow, and then they're going to have to make up their mind about dependency on another new vaccine, which, the talk of a different vaccine out there, it seems like we've had enough confusion already. We don't need a new one. What we need is more talk about how do you keep patients out of the hospital. Just think of that. That is a big breakthrough, and they're conceding that. If Fauci even said, if you get early treatment, we could keep 85% of the people out of the hospital. I mean, that is astounding. So that's what we have to concentrate on.
Yeah.
It's something that we think is very important. We do see things improving, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, Dr. Paul, that hits home a little personally too, because I can't stop wondering if they had not turned their backs on the idea of early treatment, if my own father might be still around, because at the time there was nothing being offered at all, and we were ridiculed early on for suggesting they try hydroxychloroquine. I wish we could do it over again, but we can't. But I'm ready to. I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead, Dr. Paul.
No, go ahead. Okay, finish up.
I was just going to close out if we're ready to wind it down here.
Okay.
Did you have some more that you wanted to?
No.
Oh.
I'm ready to close too.
Okay. Now, my last word, Dr. Paul, was just going to be that we have put a few tickets back on sale. We put a block on sale, and more than half of them were snapped up right away. So we, at the present, for our Washington conference, and you can see there's a link on ronpaulinstitute.org website. There look to be only about 25 tickets left, Dr. Paul. So we're happy to see that there is a renewed interest. We're happy that we've been able to invite some people to come join us that perhaps were turned away last time. But by all means, if you're interested in attending the event, it'll be at a new hotel, and the information is on the website. You should probably snap up that ticket today, because my expectation, Dr. Paul, is that they will be sold out again by the end of the day today.
Very good. You know, I want to close with trying to make a point that, you know, when the president ended up more than a year ago now, he had COVID, and he used some of those treatments, I believe, were based on every bit as good science as what the so-called scientist, the head doctor of this country, was advocating. So, but Trump, understand, used hydroxy and antibody treatment, and he got better. But did he get the hate from that? I mean, what he was doing was setting the worst example. He's going to kill people. I mean, it was just insane what they were doing. But now they're using it. But one question I could ask cynically is, do you think they're going to apologize to the president for making a huge mistake, instead of saying, hey, you know, if the president's doctors are using it, maybe we ought to offer that to our patients or look into it more? That didn't happen. And even now, with the proof coming out, even though they're quietly shifting gears, that's the most important thing, that they're shifting gears and saying that we're not likely to penalize. But doctors lost jobs over this. They've lost their position, their prestige, and it's really been, you know, very bad on the misinformation that has been dealt with. But I think the misinformation, whether it's over COVID or over foreign wars like 20 years in Afghanistan, all based on lies and innuendos and pretense, and doing it in the name of patriotism. You don't support it, you're not patriotic. They use the same terminology when we fight for a freer approach to treatment of diseases. I want to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.